Are you satisfied with your understanding of sustainability? If you are not, imagine a journey together, a pluralistic one, with academia, innovators, startups, NGOs, all looking for solutions to the greatest challenge of our time. My name is Samuele Tini, and this is the Sustainability Journey. Welcome to a new episode, and I'm thrilled to have again here Peter Fusaro discussing about the Wall Street Green Summit and the new exciting news in the climate tech space. So thank you so much, Peter, for being with us again.
Pleasure to be here and share my knowledge. Just want to give a little context that despite all the bad news, there's a lot of good news.
Fantastic. That is a good way to start.
Climate investment went up to $2.1 trillion last year. That's 11% more than 2023. That's from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Most of that was invested in EVs and renewables. Most of that investment was in the US and China, the two largest markets. Point is, things are accelerating. Most of us believe in the capital markets, we need 6, 7, 8 trillion a year to be deployed by 2050 to really decarbonize the global economy, make the world more sustainable. But the good news, it's rising. The other issue that is key that my summit's going to cover a lot of this are data centers. So this is the 24th annual Wall Street Green Summit. It is the oldest sustainable finance event in North America. It's a well-known brand around the world. We started many years ago to focus on renewables, energy efficiency, and carbon markets. It's taken time. It's taken timing. I think this decade has become the decade of sustainability, particularly sustainable finance. I was also a professor at Columbia University teaching renewable energy project finance to second-year grad students. There's a lot of knowledge capital coming from young people in this sector. That's a very good thing. They're very motivated, committed. It's not a 9-to-5 type of thing. It's a very passionate issue. So I actually see that the summit is just a once a year in New York, not during Climate Week when we have 100,000 people here, 700 events. It's once a year, bringing in experts that are practitioners in the space. So I don't have academics. I don't have government officials. I only have people that are actually practicing what they're saying. So they're expert in climate technologies, in new ideas, in venture capital, in funding. So we kind of run through technologies and we end with the funds. What are the funds doing in the space? And my thesis is green investing needs to scale. So we have a lot of startups in the room. We have solution providers, but we need to scale this puppy. We need to get this moving faster and deploy more capital globally. This is a global issue on climate change. Unfortunately, we ran through 1.5 degrees C last year. So really, many of us have believed for decades that 2% C is kind of the tipping point. And so we'll see what happens at 2%, 2 degrees, excuse me. And that's 450 parts per million. We're at I just checked yesterday, we're at 427 ppm. So we're actually combusting more fossil, and that continues to rise in greenhouse gases. This is all science. This is data driven. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about data centers.
And then can you give us the topics now that you have in this, that you try to discuss for the summit? And I think data.
We have so many. So we have
the data center, I think, is very interesting because there is a lot of hype about AI and data. But
we'll go into that. But the other topics are carbon markets, biochar, waste to value, a lot of interest there. Insurance, we have two people talking about insurance and carbon project finance. And I'm actually doing some fossil metals for sustainability because we have to use metals for EVs and solar. We're doing carbon capture and storage and methane, which is a very big greenhouse gas problem, methane leaks, which might be 80 times more damaging than CO2. So we have the people really focusing now on methane. And I just want to segue into decarbonization in buildings. So here in New York City, where I am, 75% of greenhouse gases are buildings. There are 950,000 buildings in New York. So it's not transportation, it's buildings. So there's a lot of movement of AI into building something called digital twins, where you can model a building and show the solar HVAC systems, the heating and cooling systems, the air conditioning system, the windows, et cetera. So I think the key is the use of technology now. And then so I've really rebranded this as my thing as a climate tech summit, because it's really about technology driven by markets. So the market is addressing the carbon price signal. We have to reduce carbon emissions. We haven't done a very good job of that. I've worked on climate change for 45 years, and here we are still in the beginning of a market. So I want to segue a little bit into AI. There's a lot of interest on data centers. Now, globally, 3% of energy demand are data centers. In the United States in 2020, it was 2%. In the US, we're looking at 7.5 to 8%. And this is because of what we call hyperscale data centers, which are doubling demand. So all the AI you're talking about is going to consume a lot of energy. And so for AI, we're looking at a myriad different possibilities. I mentioned buildings already, but we're also looking at metrics for emissions, looking at satellites to actually look at carbon emissions and other emissions. Automation. I've got folks talking about automating solar installations. So robotics. So there's a lot of interest in AI, and it's the application of AI. So to put it in context, my conference is all about solutions to climate change, but people are actually doing the work. It is a heavy lift. It's not simple. It doesn't happen quickly, but we try to bring in a number of experts to share their knowledge on many different things. This is a very big problem. We're also looking at agriculture. We're also looking at something fun, eco fashion. So I'm bringing in Marcy Zoroff, who 30 years ago coined the term eco fashion. So we'll have a little fun with the fashion industry. It's not that it's a big consumer of carbon, but it's interesting to talk about. So really what's the conference is about, it's storytelling. Each person has 20 minutes to speak, including Q&A. That's it. I learned a few years ago that's an optimum time to tell your knowledge, not having an advertorial, but actually providing what are you doing every day? What are you doing in terms of solutions? How are you doing this? And what's the outcome you're looking for? Now, many of these companies, to be honest, need capital. And so they're going to need scale. And I want to mention that I've just launched Wall Street Green Cap Intro, which will marry startups to investors. Who are these investors? Investors are strategic investors like energy companies, utility companies, family offices, sovereign wealth funds, impact investors, high net worth people. And so we're launching that at the summit, as well as my new business, which will be called Wall Street Green Cap Intro. We're using AI to really pull together a lot of startups, and then we're now working on the investor pool. There are other platforms doing this. It's very important that startup companies get in front of investors. And I'll tell you why. So I was part of Columbia Tech Ventures for 7 years, and I would mentor these young companies. Unfortunately, some of them just weren't ready for prime time, but they have a story to tell. So we try to help them. I think this will be facilitative for startups. I'll just give you some metrics. There are 78,000 startups in the United States, 66,000 startups in India. So I'm not saying they're all climate tech, but even if 10% of that was climate tech, we're talking an addressable market of billions, if not trillions of dollars. And the funds, I've already talked to some of the major venture capital. They're very interested in this. Oh, you can show us what's going on, because we're not reinventing the wheel. The startups already have all their data, their marketing materials, their financial models. So I just want to mention that. So it's going to be Wall Street Green Cap Intro, launching that March 18th at the summit, because the startups need more capital.
And let me go on that. How you can democratize also investment? Because sometimes, for startups, the ticket is a bit heavy, and people maybe they are asking, oh, how I can invest, how I can support, how I can be part of this movement.
It's not really a retail play, I'm sorry to say. There are a couple of solar platforms where you can buy retail tickets and invest in that. One's called Energia here in New York, Connecticut area. But no, we vet these investors. They have to be accredited investors. They just can't be anybody. Everybody's always asked me this for years. It's very risky, in my opinion, for retail investors to invest in this sector. Solar is a more mature market. I'm sure there's a nice return model. It's not double digits. You're not going to hit the ball out of the park. It's in single digits for solar. So there's a couple of retail solar plays in the US. I'm not as familiar in Europe, but really it's not for anybody. And I know everybody gets excited about GoFundMe, but you really can't base a company on GoFundMe, even though it's very democratic. We're talking, our minimum is $100,000. Our maximum is $20 million. Yesterday, I was talking to a company that takes basically water out of the air. Now they have a pilot project in San Antonio, Texas. No, excuse me, Austin, Texas. But now they need 20 million. And they've got about 11 million committed. The point being, it's very difficult for these young companies to get that lift. That's a big number, 20 million for a startup. Most need 1, 2, 3 million, maybe, because that's real. We're talking pre-seed up to an A round. And the problem becomes, and this is a human capital issue. If I'm the CEO of the company and I've got to go out and raise capital, I'm really doing two jobs. It's a very hard thing to do, continuing to pitch. People get tired and you still need money. I had a friend who worked in a startup. He did very well, successfully, software company, and he would call it months to ruin, how much cash he had in till he would go out of business. So it's difficult. And I'm being very serious about this. Some of the companies I had last year went out of business.
Yeah,
It's as simple as that. It's just part of the game. It's very hard to raise capital. I will also say, and I was an investment banker for 7 years. I just retired from investment banking in December. It took longer than I thought to raise money for companies. And investors, there's just a behavioral thing. They never want to be the first one to do it. They want to be the second one. So they say, oh, keep in touch with us. Oh, come back to us. But it's very difficult. You got to get the lead investor, we call that. It's very hard. And so I'm hoping to facilitate some of because I like the startups. I like the new ideas. I like people that have something brand new that nobody knows about. So that's what my conference is about. We give them a platform. They can talk about what they're doing.
And Peter, can I ask you, if you have to name 3 startups that they struck your heart, can you tell us?
Oh, you're making it very difficult for me.
I know.
One is, I don't know this company, but it's coming in from London, called Improvability AI. And that sounds very interesting about transforming climate tech. So that's one that could be very interesting. I've got a guy, Matt Hooper, who is launching a number of platforms in his Caplac Ventures. So he is really deep in the weeds on startup, and I'm having him give the big picture on startups. See, my mantra is, I don't know everything. I know less every year because there's more to know. So I bring in other experts. And I would say Fusaro Methane, on what they're doing in terms of capturing methane, creating carbon credits, they're really solving a problem. And they actually were very early on this. Now methane's become more of an issue globally. It's particularly leaking from pipelines. We have methane is natural gas. So we have natural gas pipelines all over the US, but also in many countries, they flare gas, which means they burn it, which is a really bad idea. So I mean, it's just a very deleterious, of the 6 greenhouse gases, it's pretty bad. It's like I said, 80 times worse than carbon dioxide. So those 3, and I mentioned the insurance. I'll just mention, this is kind of interesting. So one is to de-risk carbon projects. It's a company out of Switzerland called Carbon Pool. And the other one's a much more established company out of the UK called Axis Capital. And so he will be speaking also on insurance and climate. So I think you're starting to see the issue of the reinsurance industry, the insurance. They're getting worried about this. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago that property values in the US may decline $1.5 trillion due to climate change. I think they're underestimating this. It's a real tragedy in Los Angeles, as everybody is aware. But fires are part of climate change. When the environment changes, less rainfall, more rainfall, fires, droughts, oceans temperature rise, ocean currents changing, fish catch going down. These are all interrelated. Humanity doesn't understand we're part of an ecosystem, and the ecosystem is being very severely damaged by human beings. And there are more sustainable practices people learn. So the good news is there's a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people working on sustainability as a way to fix the problem. The bad news is we're running out of time. We really need to do this faster and bigger.
And let me ask a question have you got also something? I mean, there is also a discussion on startup about the grid, because there is a lot, even here in Africa where I stand, there is a lot of discussion about generation, putting solar panels, geothermal, but the choke point is actually the grid, which is aging, and we have several issues there. What about you?
Yeah, I'll talk about the US. Some of the grid in the US is 120 years old. It's really old. And it wasn't, and here, I've worked with a lot of utilities in the US, Japan, Korea. We missed this. Nobody thought that energy demand would be going up due to AI and also data mining with our crypto people. So long story short, we got a problem called the grid. Now there is one solution, and we have a company called Grid Market, which makes microgrids. Everything doesn't have to be big. So they have targeted island nations. So they are doing deployments in Palau and Guam and other nations where, the problem with the 55 island nations is they're all dependent on fossil energy. They all need diesel fuel. They all need number 6 oil. So microgrids are a very good solution for them because they can marry that to solar and other renewable assets. But the grid is under a lot of stress in many countries. I'm not as familiar in Africa, but in the US, we have something called load pockets where there's too much demand certain times of the year and you can't dispatch energy. And possibly we could have blackouts and brownouts, which have happened several times in the United States. That means the grid starts failing and it cascades.
And that is a major problem that I have experienced, and I am sure 120 years, and it's doing pretty well, but of course, it's a choke point for that. And let me ask a more general question. How you see there is a lot of debates in the press and movement that say the new policies in the new administration that say some they are positive for sustainability, some others seems more going back to fossil fuel. What is your take as also an academic and it can be the movement of sustainability?
I will tell you, I also was a senior executive in an oil company.
Yeah.
I was head of consulting at ABB, an original equipment manufacturer. I know this space.
Yeah.
The United States is the largest oil and gas producer in the world today. Now, how did that happen? Technology, 3D seismic, horizontal drilling, which means they knew where the molecules of fossil fuels are. So to say we're going to increase more production is ridiculous. It doesn't work that way. The industry understands where the molecules are. Where are the oil and gas reserves? We know where they are. We're not going to drill in Alaska. It's too expensive. It's about cost. Where do they drill? West Texas, North Dakota. So we're producing probably 13, 14 million barrels a day, more than the Saudis. So remember, world's largest oil and gas producer. The only thing that's going to change under Trump is that we're going to export more LNG, liquefied natural gas. And liquefied natural gas comes from the Middle East. It comes from Malaysia. It's consumed in Northeast Asia, Japan and South Korea specifically, China, Europe with Gazprom, and a lot of the issues on gas dependency of Western Europe on Russia has been consuming more LNG. So that's one thing the U.S. will be doing. But to say drill, baby, drill is just a slogan. He doesn't know what he's talking about. The U.S. is already there. And the way they do things is we know where to drill, and it's a cost issue.
Okay.
So the industry needs about $70 a barrel oil to do this. And that's about where it is right now. So we're not shutting in production. So when Trump asked OPEC to cut production, they're just laughing at him. There's nothing, he doesn't have any, he's not the king of the world. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's not going to be much damage on clean energy. Just because they don't like renewables, the climate bill never deployed the $400 billion. I don't know the exact number, but let's say it's about a third of that was deployed. So that's stopped. No more climate funding. That's finished. Tax credits are another issue because a lot of Republicans are very involved with tax credits. But for funding, it's going to come from the private sector. It's going to come from all the people I mentioned, sovereign wealth, family offices, strategics, particularly the big oil and gas and utility companies. Don't think they're stupid. They just can't create tomorrow's technology. So they do something I call technology scouts. They send people to all the things I go to, all the incubators, accelerators, clean tech, climate tech, and they buy companies. So I actually see the outcome for many of these startups will be acquisition by large energy companies, large utilities, global companies. I don't see a lot of initial public offering, IPO. I don't see that happening because the large companies have very long time perspectives. I happen to know some oil companies think out 40 years. 40 years. They are not stupid. They know they have to be sustainable. And now I'm going to point the real issue. They need young people. Okay? People are retiring. They need young people. If you are not doing sustainable things, you're not going to want to work at that company. And what you don't know, some of the major energy companies are very big purchasers voluntarily of renewable energy. So that's a key. No one's telling them to do it, they're doing it. And many years ago, I was at a meeting with Gensler, which is the world's largest architectural firm, and he told our head of the company, he said, "We can't hire young architects if we're not doing green projects." So he pointed to the Shanghai Tower. So I'm getting at behaviorally, young people are very committed to sustainability, very committed. And so I think there's things that, are missed by the press. They don't talk to young people. I talk to a lot of young people. I have a lot of interns that I'm working with. They're very committed on it. You don't have to even argue. There's the climate change denial. No, that's ridiculous. It exists. They don't even think about it. And I think what people have failed to realize is the educational system has socialized climate change to young people all over the world. This is not a political issue. This is really a humanitarian issue.
And that is fantastic, and I can see. I mean, everywhere, also us in this side of the world, sustainability is there. And I want to ask you this on that: what impact and what perspective do you see in the climate tech trends? So, what do you see maybe in the next 5 years, the hottest solution, and where do you see the space going?
Well, the real issue is we need more money. We need to start scaling. Otherwise, we're not going to get the job done. We have, to be very blunt, we have not reduced greenhouse gases very much at all with all the talk, 14,000 papers. So I actually think solar is mature, cheap enough to be globally deployed. That's a good thing. Wind is having a lot of problems right now, a lot of problems. They just canceled another wind project that Shell was involved with in New Jersey this week. So I'm not so sure where wind's going to go. I think battery technology is just going to get better and better as we move away from lithium-ion batteries. We move into airflow batteries. We move into zinc air batteries. We move into other material science. So battery for energy storage is big deal. Hydrogen, although everybody says it's 5 years away, is starting to come down in price, and more people are focusing on hydrogen. So what you can do there is marry a solar plant to hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. Hydrogen makes water vapor out of cars. I've driven fuel cell cars. They make water, which is a good thing. So, and I think you're going to see somewhat of a renaissance in energy efficiency due to technology. As I mentioned, the digital twins, but I was very instrumental in developing New York City's first energy efficiency programs 40 years ago with the utilities. We didn't get the job done. Now we have Public Law 97, where buildings are going to get penalized for not being efficient. So there's going to be a lot more push using technology to measure energy demand, energy usage. How do we model this? And I kind of like this whole digital twin thing. During Climate Week, I saw this new company, Aquila. They're not speaking at my conference, but I thought it was very interesting. So you visually can see, here's the building and here's the building's systems. And then you can change them. And I think for people visually, it's important. So I think efficiency, even though it's kind of the tail wagging the dog, may get more of a renaissance, and you could call it decarbonization. But real estate's a very big business. It's also a very conservative business. So in New York City, just to give you some metrics, new construction's platinum, LEED platinum. It's all sustainable. That's new construction. Most of the building infrastructure in the United States, the building stock, are old buildings. So I live in a building that's 115 years old on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. We don't have a thermostat in the building. So there's just a need to start looking at energy a little differently. I don't see, people kept talking about high prices. I don't see high prices. $70 a barrel, $80 a barrel, $3, $5, $7 for natural MMBTU for natural gas. This is all affordable. The game is reducing the carbon footprint. That's the real game. And that's the energy footprint. I've spent my whole career working on the energy. Now, why energy? Energy is 73% of greenhouse gases. 73%. So 3/4 of greenhouse gases are impacted by the energy industry. So that's what I focused on, taking lead out of gasoline, working on the Prius, working on things that basically use less energy and reduce carbon. And one thing I'm very proud of is I helped get the lead out of gasoline all over the world. Because I went to Southeast Asia and said, we have something called fuel reformulation. And it was like the accidental tourist. 4 countries changed their law. I spoke at every dirty energy conference. See, my game is you have to find common ground with people. You can't say you're the enemy. You can't make people defensive. Now you turn that around. You make things, we can work together. I mean, I invented the words green trading, green finance over 30 years ago. Why? Because people can make money doing the right thing. I want the outcome. So they can make money doing that's okay, but I want the outcome. The outcome is the biggest issue is human health and welfare. All of the stuff we're talking about is human health and welfare. If we don't do these things, people will get sick, people will die. It's just that we're talking systems. This is a systems issue.
And I really like that because there is a lot of entrenchment in the discussion in the sustainability movement as while we have more things in common than that, because this is, as you said, a humanity problem. Is not a political problem. So it's really some finding solutions that are really there. And then it's a perspective that is often forgotten, especially in the sustainability movement. I've noticed.
You're talking to someone who's given 2,000 speeches, written 700 articles, 17 books, been all over the world, 50 countries, talking to people. Because you talk to people. I'll give you examples. So I was in Singapore, the head of Petro Vietnam came up to me, chairman. He said, Peter, I like what you're saying, but it's too expensive for Vietnam. And I said, sir, do you have grandchildren? So there's a generational issue also. And, not to be too corny, but you're supposed to leave the world a better place. And, people used to laugh at me when I told them that, but that's my mission. I mean, that's what I'm about. And that is not stupid or silly. It's real. And so I think this generational shift is really a big deal. I was with somebody a few days ago who's 38. They said, well, it's millennials and Gen Z, whatever it is. He says, well, I'm a little on the cusp of that. I said, doesn't matter. I'm 74. Doesn't matter. I've been doing this thing since Earth Day 1970. Not everybody's like me, but I have been, instrumental in mentoring 2 generations of young people as a professor, as a mentor. I'm still mentoring people from all over the world. I've got Korean woman, Indian woman, Chinese woman, Indian guys, and mostly international people gravitate me. Don't ask me why. But the point is they're there. They're there. They have the brains. They're smart and they're dedicated.
Fantastic, Peter. And it's been a pleasure and honor having you. I think it will be a very successful summit. And I'm glad also that you came back to the sustainability journey to discuss it. It's been an honor and pleasure having you.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that you had me. Thank you.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.